Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today myself, Ashley Coffin, and Paul Hoppy will be diving into the new MCU movie Black Widow. All that after a commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. I'm Matthew, your host, and I'm joined by what's becoming kind of a pretty regular pair of guests because I just love the way the three of us interact. You know, we're all East Coasters, so I don't have to delete long pauses as we all politely wait for someone else to speak. Paul and Ashley, I'll just throw it to both of you. How y'all doing? You fight. Who says first?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm so happy. New content, things to talk about. And what better movie to talk about ethics than this one? Because it was pretty messed up.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I've got a lot to say. I'll probably try not to say all of it.
Very legit, very legit. Yeah, and I know, Ashley, you were just talking to us about how you'd seen it a second time. I think I'm curious to see it a second time. There's a lot of ethical stuff in it that I raised some eyebrows for me and I want to kind of think more about. But I think in some ways it just felt so good to get to see this movie after so much waiting. Mm-hmm. And in terms... It's kind of funny because I sometimes think that like the MCU and Disney Plus have kind of raised my bars so high that I forget that sometimes it is just fun to like sit in a theater and eat popcorn and watch a movie for a couple of hours. And this movie does, because I want to like start with your kind of general thoughts on the movie. And I'll just start by saying like I think the movie did that perfectly. You know, it was there's a lot of moments where I was like, yeah, okay, I don't get that, but sure, the explosions are looking pretty and the character development is fun, so cool, let's go with it. What'd you all think of the movie?
I mean, I really liked it. I love her so much, Nat, as a character, and finally getting to see her get her own movie was really important. And like I said in the MCU cast, like they didn't pull their punches with her backstory, which I could imagine would be really hard to figure out how to make into a PG-13 movie.
Right. Paul, what about yourself?
Yeah. I love Black Widow as a character. I did not love the movie. I didn't go to a theater to see the movie. I'm not sure if I'm ever going to go see a movie in the theater again.
Like, I hated it. I hated it.
What? Oh, going to a theater?
Yeah, when I really did not have an enjoyable experience at the, like, it was just, I was trying to watch everything. I feel like we were a little too close in an IMAX. Yeah. And so watching it at home on Disney Plus literally the next day, it was almost like watching a completely different movie.
That's awesome. Like, we were halfway through the movie and you know that, like, I've drank a lot of water. I'm like, wait, we can pause the movie. Mm-hmm. And not try and figure out which scene is not going to be important, you know?
Like, the run to the bathroom.
So, like, I really appreciated that. Also, like, as this is an ethics podcast, I will mention that I think, I don't think it's great to have movies in theaters with people not wearing masks right now. I just don't think it's great. So I'm not going to harp on that, but I just need to, like, at least say it. And having the opportunity to watch this at home, I really appreciated. As I didn't mention yesterday, but like having watched Raya and the Last Dragon and Luca, which maybe that podcast will come out after this one, I'm not sure, but being able to watch them at home just feels like, yeah, this is my preferred experience, you know? And I did used to love going to movies. There was a theater that I would go to every single movie that they had. And I just don't anymore. And so I think having both options available to people in general, I think is a good thing. So I really do appreciate that they did release it simultaneously, and that I didn't have to like dodge spoilers for 90 days or whatever.
Yeah, and it's too bad that you have to pay for it, or at least in the cases of some of us on this call, one of us had to pay for it. And like, in fairness, when I talk about it being like a theater movie, I didn't get to see it in the theater. My partner was not feeling well, so we stayed home, watched it online. And I'm kind of mixed on that. I think there's obviously so much to get into with like the pandemic and stuff like that was kind of out of our purview for this. I do think that there's a fun movie going experience of watching movies that I'm not going to take very seriously in the theater. Sure. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I mean with this one. Like, I feel like if I want to just be entertained for 2 hours and eat popcorn, this is a perfectly good movie. It's, in some ways, I feel like because especially I watched it at home and I wasn't getting that, that's why, like, a lot of the questions that it raised, where I was like, I don't love that. You know, a lot more of that was coming up for me. But I think a lot of that, I mean, it's kind of like the discussion about, like, is it better to binge a show or is it better to have it out episode by episode? I think to some extent it's just going to be personal preferences. But for sure, I am very glad, that we have both options, because I was supposed to be on a podcast for Fast and the Furious a couple weeks ago on a different network, and I had to drop out because we had tickets. I couldn't go at the last minute. And then I found myself getting like very annoyed that I couldn't just watch it online somewhere by paying for it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that we stay with that model, certainly, because I do like the option of being able to I like that everybody has the option, because both with all the safety concerns about theaters and stuff like that, but also just because different people experience different movies in different ways. You know, This is what I'd much rather do.
And also in terms of like accessibility, right? Like there are people who just have reasons aside from a pandemic that like going to theaters isn't a good option.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's definitely true. Well, okay, so we're going to dive into a lot of the ethical questions it raised, and we've kind of touched on it a bit more. But just so, Paul, I know you kind of like had a lot of critiques in the movie. What did you like about it?
What did I like about it? Yeah, I have a list of bullet points, and there's like 7 bullet points. So that's like a full clip.
Okay.
So
nice.
These are things that I really liked about it. Like, I really enjoyed the intra-family interactions. They were often funny and occasionally poignant. The hand-to-hand action was very good. I've seen it referenced as being Bourne style, and I think that's fair and part of what I like about it. That was the part of the action I liked, the hand-to-hand stuff.
Right.
The Natasha versus Yelena fight specifically was very good. Although I was like, why are they fighting?
Yeah, it was very brutal.
I couldn't enjoy that fight because it felt to me like they were fighting only because in team-up movies, the people have to fight each other first before they decide to team up. And that just feels like such a dumb trope.
Yes.
I'm glad that people could enjoy the fight. I was just like, there's 0 point in the plot for them to fight right now.
That was exactly how I felt. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to enjoy this as a spectacle while, you know, the intellectual part of my brain is like, this does not need to be in the movie.
There's anger there. There's anger there, though. I mean, Yelena hasn't seen, you know, Nat never came for her. They don't know whose side what, you know, is on. And, you know, they're both being a little aggressive out the gate. I think they were kind of feeling each other out to see what they could do.
I think like having a dynamic like that makes sense. I think actually physically fighting each other with guns and knives and whatever, like while there might be people trying to hunt them down, it's like, you know, work that stuff out later, kind of. I don't know.
Yeah. This is how they work things out in this family.
I guess so. I did feel like the widow versus widows fight at the end was really well done and like made sense. You know?
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, for most of the movie, I liked that the scope of danger and threat was fairly small, you know? And that it was, like, contained. You know, then they kind of blew it up at the end. I appreciated that I didn't feel like the characters were overly sexualized. Which I think is certainly a concern in a lot of movies, and that they didn't really particularly go there. And then one thing that I think is sort of to me the biggest deal is like they had Nat do something legit awful in her backstory, that she believed the ends justified the means, but also like the fact that they let her do that and have that be a thing she did for S.H.I.E.L.D. I feel like that's powerful, and the writers kind of trust the audience to not just kind of totally lose their enjoyment and appreciation and, you know, the way they can relate to the character, even with her doing something like, you know, blowing up a kid.
Right.
Yeah. And they told us that in Avengers, right? That kind of a little bit that she had done that.
They did. They implied it, right? And then here they showed it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's funny that one moment I thought set up a really good thing that I then was very unhappy with how they paid it off. And we'll talk about that when we talk about kind of like the way this whole idea of collateral damage was handled. But I do think you're right. And I'd agree with most of those things. And I think that was, to me, I know, and this can kind of get into one of our big questions. I also just starting kind of with the basic, like, I think it's so important that we did get this movie. The women-led action movies have been few and far between. And I thought this was a really good way of having that kind of a movie. And Ash, I know this is something you've talked about a lot, so I kind of want to let you handle it. What was the importance of that, of this movie, and especially some of the topics it covered and the way it covered them?
What I appreciated about how they filmed this movie, you know, director was a woman. It wasn't the feminism and all the things that go with it. It wasn't like shoved down anybody's throat. So everybody can watch this and kind of appreciate, you know, a powerful woman. You know, they had her in a couple like sexy shots, which I saw people complaining about, but I'm like, you know, we do this with the men. I didn't have such a problem with it because it wasn't like she wasn't in a tank top and, underwear in any scenes. Like, it was different. I don't know. I thought very empowered by all her stances and everybody. All the women in there were really great. Florence especially. I love her. And again, like, you got to go to like the human trafficking and trying to shed a light on that. And it's also like, I don't want to get too far ahead because I know we're going to talk about stuff later, but the way she acts with Dreykov at the end, is how a lot of women act without some kind of pheromone power stopping you from hitting them. The cowering, the making yourself small, him like physically holding her down with his body, like that's terrifying for women. Even that first scene when he raises his fist to hit her and she flinches, like I had a physical reaction to that.
Yeah.
Luckily she played him well, like played him pretty well, but yeah, that whole scene is I think it's just so important to see, like, even someone as powerful as Natasha, like, this is what it can feel like. Like, if you think about yourself as an actress in a situation with a Harvey Weinstein, I feel like that is a perfect example of what it could feel like.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that makes total sense to me. And I did think that scene with Dreykov was so powerful, especially at the end, where, like, there's a part of me that even kind of hopes that, like, maybe his punch did actually, like, sever her nerve, but she wasn't going to even let him have that. Like, no, you were not strong enough. I have to do this myself.
I loved it.
It was just such a great way of, like, reversing that power dynamic. And, I'm so glad he pointed that out. Mm-hmm. I also, especially when you're talking about, like, the posing and the sexiness of it, it felt like a lot of this movie was very intentionally, like, making fun of what earlier directors have done and earlier writers have done with her character.
Yeah.
And here I'm thinking about the whole running gag about Yelena making fun of, like, that shot that was in every single Iron Man trailer of her, like, landing from a jump with her leg all the way out in this, like, Catwoman pose and flipping her hair. And it's just like, okay, we're going to completely sexualize her in this combat moment. And so to have the movie literally make fun of that, I just was like, okay, that's such a good way of being like, in some ways it reminded me like of what Birds of Prey did, of kind of like poking some fun at how Suicide Squad had treated Harley. Like, this felt very in that same vein of, yeah, we've not always treated Natasha's character well, and here we're going to acknowledge it and fix it.
Yeah, I love when Yelena does it later and she's like grossed out by it.
Yeah, like, no, totally impractical.
She's like, ugh.
Yeah, that's not a good way to land.
The other kind of thing that people most often brought up in terms of how Natasha's character was handled before her death, which obviously also brings up a huge amount of stuff, but was the way that, like, that scene in Ultron where she's talking to Hulk and he's like, she basically tries to empathize with how monstrous he can be by saying, like, or he thinks he can be, by saying, well, because I can't get pregnant. And people obviously were very upset about that scene, I think for very good reason. Mm-hmm. And the scene where both her and Yelena are describing in pretty awful detail, what actually happened to them in terms of these non-consensual hysterectomies and surgeries. Yeah. And like, I didn't love the tone of it. We can get into that later, but like them basically like forcing a man to confront that and not to look away. That also felt very specifically a like, yeah, this could have been better in Ultron. Let's fix that now, which I really appreciated.
Well, and of course they had to go into that with making a period joke, which is why it went there. They went there immediately. I was like, really? He's really going to ask them if it's that time of the month? And I thought that they handled it really well.
Mm-hmm. I really liked that scene until I didn't. Like,
yeah.
Like I felt like it was, I don't know. I feel like that scene in Ultron could be fine as long as like, Bruce could have just said like one thing, like that doesn't make you a monster, Right. I think it's fine for her to think that about herself and be wrong.
But wasn't he saying in that point of the conversation, he was telling her like, I can't give you a family, I can't have kids.
Right.
And I guess at the end she's like, you're not the only monster.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So it's like I feel like that's like one more line could have actually made it work in Ultron because like people do think things about themselves that aren't true or fair or whatever, right? Because society does put whatever pressures on people. Right. And here I felt like they did a really good job of being like, no, we're going to make this real and make you like confront it. But then they turned it into a joke. And it's like, it just felt to me a little bit like, like maybe you could go 30 seconds without getting a laugh right now, you know?
Yeah. I think that's Disney being scared because they are trying to make this like PG-13 movie. So they're trying to do this balancing act, which when it's something this dark, like it doesn't exactly work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of my bigger concerns. I think that scene's a perfect example where it felt like there's these two tones they're kind of holding in the movie and not really conflating them well. I will say, though, on the other side, the one other thing I want to bring in, especially in terms of like the importance of this movie and the issues it was, you know, in terms of it being like a woman-led movie and the issues it was covering, and actually I know you talked about this on the MCU cast, I love that the way that they like really front and center named like what is happening to the girls who become widows is trafficking. It is quite literally human trafficking. But they also did that in a way without, like, they never sexualized that in any way, which to me felt like I would love to see a movie that did cover that and did go into the sexualization of it, and looked at how problematic that was. I felt like then that has to be the entire movie, and it has to be then you can't have the lighthearted jokes along the way, you know, like, and so in some ways I was like, that felt to me like they were going to address this trafficking, they were going to really handle it well, but understand that like there's a depth of seriousness that issue could go into that they can't do in this movie, and so they're not even going to touch it.
Right. I think that's why they made their opening scene so long. Because if you watch some of the clips in there, it does show girls in like dresses, like sexy little cocktail dresses, young girls, when they're doing flashes of the pictures. And then like how powerful the impact of like the only thing they were trying to hold on to still were like stuffed animals. That I would want to watch that whole opening sequence slower to see if they weren't trying to be like, okay, we can't really do this because it's a Marvel movie, it's PG-13, but we're going to subliminally put some images in here that will stay with you after you watch it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way to put it. And I mean, that rendition of Smells Like Teen Spirit was just so haunting and perfect for that moment.
Ugh, get the chills just talking about it.
I don't really like it.
Oh, Paul.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. The trafficking thing, like, it's obviously such an important issue. It's a horrible issue that exists in our world today, right? That it's really hard to cover in something like this, I think. And I agree that like sort of shying away from the fact that most trafficking in our world is, you know, sex trafficking, right? I think was a good choice. I will say that having the core conspiracy of the film be related to child trafficking by some shadowy Russian figure, when over the last 5 years Democrats have been crowing about Russian boogeymen and QAnon and Republicans have some ludicrous child trafficking conspiracy theory, it didn't feel good to me. And some of that's like, but it's like, does that mean you shouldn't do it? Not necessarily, but like, I mean, personally, just like, I'm kind of over the whole like Russian villain in a spy film, like, for a long time. But at the same time, it's like, you know, I know that's like her backstory. And
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, how else?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's tricky, you know. And it also struck me as a little odd that it was like 1995 or whatever, right? So it was clearly after the Cold War. But of course, you know, the fact that Dreykov was apparently maybe acting on his own. I actually didn't find it super clear whether there was, like, was he part of Hydra and then wasn't because Hydra got destroyed? Or it felt a little unclear to me in terms of whatever affiliations there might have been at whatever points in time.
Well, it was S.H.I.E.L.D. trucks going after them in the beginning when they were running from the So I guess, and then it was a big shock that he was alive. So do we think that he like worked for Hydra and then after faking his own death, like went out on his own?
I think that's the implication, but it felt unclear to me.
I didn't really think about that until right now.
My take on it, especially because they talked at one point about like robbing from a S.H.I.E.L.D. facility that was actually a Hydra facility, was that, and maybe this is more hope because I really wanted it, is that they weren't Hydra, that they were just kind of their own offshoot thing. And I think part of how the thing that I wish they had made a little clear, because I also think it would have really helped Alexi's character so much, is like, Paul, you talked about how this was like in 95, it's like just a couple of years after the Soviet Union falls and communism falls. To me, like, part of the reason why I'm okay with all the Red Room stuff is that is somewhat based on like real things that the KGB was doing under the Soviet Union in terms of like training young girls from a young age to be like both like, you know, very sexy seductresses and spies. And like, that's a real thing that happened. And I'm sure the CIA did too. But I know that was kind of like the original inspiration for some parts of the Black Widow story. And especially with like Alexei talks about the party at times, you know? Yeah. And I think that like, to me, there could have been such a beautiful story there of these people who were doing these terrible things, the parents, but they all thought it was justified in the name of, you know, the ideals of communism that they thought they were helping to bring about.
Right.
And that, you know, now the Soviet Union has fallen and they're not getting the support they need. And now like the Red Room is going off on its own. And so that's kind of why they, you know, to me that like it's a general more ethical thing that we can get into later, but I was very unhappy for the most part with the way the parent story was handled, because I felt like to see them be so complicit in the trafficking and then not to get much of an arc, but just to all of a sudden be like heroes again with the girls felt really off to me. And I think that like making it about that Alexei was a communist and that when the Soviet Union fell, like he kind of lost, you know, he kind of was on the outs, or he didn't understand where things were going anymore. And that's where the loss of faith happened. Because then it also addresses what you're talking about, where now Dreykov was like, to me, it would be kind of like Dreykov is to the Soviet Union as Red Skull was to the Nazis. You know, that like it was started by the Soviet Union, the KGB, but eventually he was like, okay, these KGB idiots are fools, and the Soviet Union's falling apart. I'm going to go off and do my own thing. And so maybe that's why both of the parents are now like against Dreykov. You know, like there was so much storytelling potential there that I felt like they lost out on.
Yeah, putting him in jail probably helped.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one of the things where I was like, I feel like putting Alexei in jail didn't make any sense.
No, he could just get out, I feel like.
Right, like, time. Either you kill him or you use him. Like, imprisoning him made no sense to me.
No.
You know, and it's like you have a super soldier here just, like, hanging out in a prison that seems, like, fairly normal. Like, I don't know. That part didn't... You know, not to mention the whole burying the prison and basically killing everyone in the prison, possibly. Many of whom might have been political prisoners, like, just like it was nothing.
Yeah. Oops.
Yeah, so yeah, let's get into the topic of agency, and then a part of it is collateral damage. Okay, that's really a big part of this.
Yeah.
Here's... Because to me, I think this was my central problem with the movie. And granted, I didn't watch any of the trailers. Maybe if I'd watched the trailers, I would have known to expect something different. But I think, like... To me, the Black Widow movie that I always wanted was the movie that shows why did she join S.H.I.E.L.D.? You know, why did she decide to stop being a Black Widow? Like, you know, she's still Black Widow, but you know what I mean? Like, to stop being the spy, to stop having red in her ledger, and to try and, like, make a face turn.
Right.
You could have made that movie 7 years ago, and it would have been fantastic. Today, like, I understand, okay, they don't think they can make that movie anymore. Maybe Jeremy Renner doesn't want to make that movie. Like, I know we got his voice for like 3 seconds, but, you know, obviously he wasn't in it.
Right.
Beyond that. So what I thought was going to happen was they're going to say, let's take the story of Yelena, this younger spy who basically has to face the same decision that Natasha does, and that Natasha will kind of like help guide her through deciding to make a face turn and to stop being part of the Black Widows and to become part of something better. And then in doing so, like, maybe through flashbacks or maybe just Natasha telling her about her own experience, we'll get a better understanding of what Natasha went through because Yelena went through it as well. And so when like 5 minutes into the movie, we get this or 15, whatever, I'm bad at time, you know, we get this red mist, and just magically Yelena becomes a good person again, or at least not the person she was. To me, that felt like such a missed opportunity, because now... Yes, there are some agency of some of the other characters, but that central question of like, why do you stop? How do you overcome all these years of being brainwashed as a child soldier and find your way back to some better choices was totally thrown out the window.
I agree. It just, the whole red mist thing, like, I don't think from the trailers I saw it coming. I think that they had like vials, but I didn't know what, you know, didn't have any idea what it was. And just for that to be within the first couple minutes, you're like, well... Character development? Okay.
Yeah. That, I mean, by that point, I kind of didn't like the movie. And or like when that happened, like that sequence getting to there were still parts that I continued to enjoy as it went on, but like I did have a feeling like this wasn't Nat's story. Right. And what I was expecting, like I've wanted to see a Black Widow movie since Avengers came out, at least, and and I wanted it to be her movie, and I would have liked something that was more more Bourne and less Bond. I'll get into that a little later, but like mostly in terms of like the agency, it's like. Yeah, it's like, okay, well then if you're telling Yelena's story and the parents' story, which I think this was more their story than it was Nat's story, right? She was kind of more like a character reacting to what was going on with them. Like, if you're going to do that, then having it all be just this red mist, whatever kind of agency, I feel like they didn't really sell whatever the turn, like the parents I don't think really earned trust in a way that was reasonable, right? And I felt like it kind of couldn't decide whose story it was, and like Natasha had agency going forward once she decided to do what she was going to do, right? Except for the moment when she didn't, and then she broke her own nose, and then she did, which also like everything that you said about that, Ashley, I find very powerful, and makes me appreciate that scene more than I did as I was viewing it. But at the same time, I still have reservations about actually taking away the character's agency. The fact that she was able to overcome it, and I think is great, And then,
to me, the key.
Yeah, go ahead.
To me, the key there is I wish she had been the one to figure it out.
Oh yeah,
about the olfactory nerve.
Yeah,
because then she would have had the agency of she has the power to break his control. Instead, so like when it was the mom, I was like, okay, that sucks.
Yeah, if she didn't know about it. And then she figured it out, and then she's like, oh, wait, well, I know this. Like, all right, here's why I love Black Widow, but not, like, the movie Black Widow. Like, Natasha Romanoff is an unenhanced human who's supposed to be clever, cunning, and hyper-competent. And in movies like The Avengers and Winter Soldier, I feel like they do pretty good justice to this idea. They do that some here, but then they also, like... Instead of, like, writing, like, clever and realistic fight and chase scenes, they go over the top and make it more like a Bond film. And, one of my favorite things about a character like Batman in the Justice League, animated series, not the Snyder mess, is that, like, he's a peak-conditioned human who's really, really smart, really competent, and finds a way to hang with these larger-than-life heroes who have amazing superpowers. Yeah. And, like, at one point, he's in his Batwing, and it crashes, and he's falling out of it, and he's like, hey, if anyone can catch me, that would be great. I can't fly at all. Like, and then like Wonder Woman saves his ass, I think, right? Because like she would have to. And like here, one of the things I love about Black Widow in the MCU is like she's so badass that she's a normal human who can do extraordinary things that humans can actually conceivably do without any superpowers. And so when they have the like falling floating fortress fight fiasco at the end, it felt so illogical and like I want to see her be really clever and figure out the thing about the olfactory nerve, right? I want to see
exactly.
Show me how she escapes from Ross. Like that could have been a really clever, like she does something really smart, really badass, whatever. Like they just cut and they're like, oh, she did it, like because she's that badass. I'm like, show me that, and then the second time he shows up, you can cut away from it, like. And just like...
but they did it both, and that bothered me more on the second time, like when the family leaves.
Yeah, me too. I was like, what?
And it just cuts out. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
How did she get out of there?
And like that scene with Dreykov was frustrating, especially because you did get to see her do one of her coolest things.
Yeah.
Where, like to some extent, you're right. I think Ashley, you're very right. Like there was a good deal of actual cowering, I think, to some extent, which is very relatable, and I'm so glad you made that point. But I also think she was playing him the exact same way she played Loki back in Avengers. And I thought that was such a good callback. Mm-hmm. And that's why, to me, the mother knowing it and telling her undersold it. Because if the whole thing was, like, she was playing into dumb male ego to get him to monologue and to waste time while she figured out how to beat him, like, that would have made so much more sense, It also would have meant he had to monologue about an actual plan instead of just, like, I have 50 widows around the world, mwahaha.
Yeah.
Like, that was super dumb.
I thought it was interesting the way, for, like, the other side of it, her going and knowing exactly how to act with a powerful, cruel man like that just shows
That's
how
true.
good she is, because she was very convincing. You know, we didn't know that she knew right away, and that scene was so hard to watch because of that.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair
sure.
point.
She played it so well. Like, she let him smack her around, and she cowered, and you actually believed, like, oh shit, you know, she can't hit him. Like, what is going to happen here?
And then she's like, thank you for your cooperation.
Oh my God, when she did that little smile, I smiled back. I was like, oh my God.
that callback was so perfect.
Oh my God, she got him.
Because you're right, Paul. To me, that's her. It's not only her being very smart and figuring things out, but her being so good at playing others. You know, so good at manipulating others.
And that's why I do really like the fact that she did know, and she was hoping the whole time that he would knock it out of her, and just to get that last dig to just degrade him and, you know, unmasculine him one more time, to be like, you old man weren't even strong enough to do it, so watch me break my face on your desk. I don't know, I liked it.
I can see that. That's fair. Back to just the agency point, though, one of the things that I kept thinking of is I've read a lot about, you know, sort of child soldiers and what happens when, like, these armies kidnap kids when they're 4 or 5 or 6 and raise them, and how it you know, it's not in a supervillain kind of way, but the best way to describe it is brainwashing.
Right.
And we can see it, like, in cults and stuff like that, or even, like, certain political movements, perhaps, in this country.
Yeah,
like,
QAnon.
And the story of people who, like, as adults break away from those things are very powerful.
Yeah.
And to me, that's, again, that's why the Red Mist thing bothered me so much, was just I wanted that part of the story. And to lead it in, though, to the kind of the thing that you both were talking about that kind of brought me around to this was, I think another big part of that was missing was the way they handle this topic of collateral damage. Because we start out by hearing that Black Widow, in order to try and kill Dreykov, though it turns out she was unsuccessful, you know, was okay killing his daughter as well. And that's, I don't like it when someone says, like, I've read my ledger and they mean one specific event. I more hoped it was, like, you know, a long series of things, and this is just a worst example.
I think
I'm in a head. Yeah, I think that is the case for sure. So to me, I feel like what that would mean is that now, like, you know, she maybe is going to try and, like, at least pass a little bit of that on to Yelena. So as you said, like, when during a prison break, it isn't a Hydra prison. It isn't a super evil prison. It's just a prison in Russia with guards who are getting paid, you know, to do the thing they're supposed to do. They're not evil. And Yelena just, like, breaks out a rocket launcher to blow one of them up, and then also this terrible avalanche. And, like, when the rocket launcher happened, Natasha does give her a look for a second, and I was like, okay, awesome. We're gonna have a moment of Natasha being like, no, we can't just kill bystanders with, you know, I did collateral damage, that wasn't okay, we have to change. For that plot point to be completely dropped, and then there to be nothing about that, or nothing about, like, all the guards on the floating station who might have been killed, to me that really bothered me as well, because it just felt like they raised this thing that in theory she should be confronting as, like, an ethical issue, and then both she never confronts it and she never confronts Yelena about it.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
there's got to be more than 20, 25 people on that big floating space station, or whatever the heck that was. We only saw about 15, 20 people.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I feel worse for the prisoners than the guards. I don't know. That's just
also true. Yeah, also
yeah,
true.
Yeah.
My leanings, but like, yeah, it's like, you know, you go blowing people up and then killing people in an avalanche and dropping them out of the sky, and, like, you know that, particularly when it was juxtaposed with how much she, like, wasn't going to kill any of the Black Widows or use lethal force against them, or what, you know, deliberately lethal, what you know qualifies as lethal force in comics.
Right.
You know, I don't know. Yeah, that didn't work for me. I felt like, and it could have been something that they played into, you know, and it could have shown like how it is, like, yeah, if you're an assassin and then you're trying to not be an assassin, like, it's not always easy to stop killing people. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, especially because that idea of, like, we have to kill this awful leader and we're okay that they're, like, a young child in the house with them because this is their only chance.
Right.
Like, that's not made up from fantasy world. Like, that's a decision-making process that happens. Like, you know, a lot of time we, like, fire off a missile into somewhere, or, you know, other governments do the same kind of thing. Like, to me, that would have been such a good issue to see them wrestle with a little bit, but just got
And
dropped.
I guess it seems like S.H.I.E.L.D. was okay with her doing that, because there's no way they didn't know.
I thought she said that, because I thought like the little bit of Hawkeye's voice we hear is him saying, I thought he asked her, is Dreykov alone in the building? And she says yes.
Okay.
I mean, also though, like Hawkeye maybe not approving of what, like, I feel like Fury might not really care if he blew up a kid.
Yeah.
You know?
That's fair. Yeah. Which is again like, what if we just got a movie about Budapest? You know?
Right. Yeah. Like that, I definitely would have read. And I can understand though how maybe that would feel like it was like Black Widow and Hawkeye movie, and so it didn't really feel like a solo film. And I think one of the things that's a real shame about having so few female-led solo films to this point is I feel like we're past the point where solo films make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so it's like you kind of this gets into the prequelitis, but like I feel like they kind of missed the chance where it made a lot of sense to do it because like they just weren't there yet. And I think these movies would have done well then as well. I mean, I always thought that they could have had female-led action movies for a long time before they actually started doing it, or led by people of color or whatever. Like,
yeah, I think that's a good point. I think if you put Hawkeye in the movie, it would have to be something like Budapest is the last third.
Yeah,
and he doesn't really show up. Like maybe they have one 10-second fight earlier in the movie, but most of the movie is about her in the the school and her doing the terrible things and her slowly evolving, and then Hawkeye is a part of the last third of her face turn. But you're right. Yeah, if it would be a Hawkeye and Black Widow movie, that would have definitely undercut that big deal.
And like, I would rather see that movie, not because I'd rather it. I mean, this one didn't even feel like it was her movie, like her story, because it felt so much like it was supposed to be Yelena's or the parents' story in terms of the characters who were actually making new choices or whatever. But like, she did get to be the main badass.
Yeah, and I think that's what I mean about the Red Mist, is because to me, this would work if it was Yelena's story, but the very clear implication is Yelena's story was Natasha's story.
Right,
it was all about like the parallels there.
And then Natasha's kind of mentoring through it, as opposed to be like, oh, you got the Red Mist, you're good? Okay, cool.
Yeah. Exactly. So let's talk about the kind of tone of the movie, because we brought this up a bit, especially that scene with them talking about the hysterectomies and the forcible, non-consensual hysterectomies, and then the Alexei kind of just making a joke of it. What was kind of your thoughts, Paul, about like they're feeling like the movie could never figure out when to stop making jokes, or however you describe this the tone of the movies?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I really enjoy movies and TV shows that blend humor with very serious stuff. And I think this movie was definitely trying to do that. But I think it's a very delicate thing. And I think it requires a certain amount of trust, like that your audience can sit through something that's basically just drama or just trauma or, or just fighting without quips. Like, it was very quippy, And like, I understand that's like very common in comic stuff, but like, it really only works for me for a few characters. And it just felt like there were times when I thought they were like, we need to like get a laugh in here. We can't lean into this serious stuff for too long, which, the intro scene didn't, right? The intro scene, I think actually did a pretty good job. I didn't love the whole opening sequence, but I do feel like it did a really good job of kind of setting up what I think they wanted to be the tone, which was like serious, but with, humanity and humor. But just, it felt like they, I don't know, just didn't kind of quite strike that balance, however it is. It's not like a yes or no thing. It's just, it didn't quite do it for me.
Yeah. I feel like Yelena's stuff hit for me. She was constantly making me laugh throughout, like giggle throughout the whole thing. A lot of her lines were written well in a way that it would make sense.
Right.
But yeah, the Alexei stuff it was just like, I saw someone made a comment like, there's one character in this movie you could take out and it would be the exact same movie, and it's definitely him. And it was like, if you just took him out of the movie, really nothing would change.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And the way I kind of think of it, as you were both talking about, to me, there's a difference between people in hard situations who, as the people they are, say funny things, versus like gags in a movie. And like, to me, The Wire is one of my favorite TV shows I've ever seen, and probably one of the absolute darkest. Like, it is all about like the broken corruption of human institutions and all of this. And like, people do funny things. People say funny things. I laughed uproariously at that show, but it always felt very clear. It was very in the moment. Yelena kind of saying to Alexei like he's wrong about the gas, and then a gag of the helicopter falling from the sky in a way that they all should have died from. But like, like that to me, that kind of going with what you're saying, that to me felt like it would only happen in a Bond movie, not a Bourne movie.
Like, that felt like classic mansplaining to me. And yet again, like as women, when you're like, this thing is not going to work, and a man's like, yes, it is. You don't know what you're talking about. So often we wait to see you proved wrong without, being like fighting about it. You're just like, well, fine, you'll see. Because we are so easily like just cower down to that for some reason. But that's how I kind of saw it, because she knew that it wasn't going to happen, and it was more of a like, well, you'll see, you'll be proved wrong. But so often that's how it happens, is like, we know we're right, but we just stay silent because we know the outcome will be shown at the end, and then you get to be like, told you so, because it doesn't matter what you say, they're not going to listen. I
think that's very fair, and I think that's a really good point. I felt like the execution of that through this like sight gag that didn't seem to fit the rest of the movie just felt off. But I think you're right in terms of it being the like, her being like, well, okay, I'm going to prove you wrong instead of arguing with you about it. That makes total sense to me, and I'm really glad you pointed that out, because I probably didn't see it as much as you did.
I think, Ashley, you make a really good point, and I think, Matthew, you make a good point too. And it's just like, maybe you could do the same thing, but in a little bit less of a gag way. And maybe it would have a little different tone, right? Like, you can do the same idea, but you can show them, like, actually, like, trying to land the thing and be like, I told you,
Yeah. The laughs, I guess I feel a little more lenient when they do that, because you're like, okay, that's for the kids, it's for the children.
Sure, for the children.
For the children.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think especially the part about Alexei's character could have been removed. To me, I think that's the kind of most damning thing about this, because in many ways, he was my favorite character. Like, I thought he was such an interesting character, and this idea of like the person holding on to the like the forgotten dreams and the like. To me, I think one of the things that really hurt the movie was when they tried to give both of the parents kind of a redeemable arc. Especially when she's still like, oh yeah, all that terrible thing happened to my kids 15 years ago, but I'm still torturing pigs because why not?
Yeah, the pig torture.
I can't forgive her for that.
Oh man,
that was a big problem.
To me, I feel like you could have really had moments of Alexei being like, yeah, no, like that's not the path I'm on anymore, and there being the other way, and like one of the parents not being okay, but the other one earning some trust. Trying to do both of their stories just didn't work, and like there's that scene towards the end where Alexei has had some awareness and growth, and he's realized how badly he's treated these girls, and like all the awfulness about not respecting them, and the mansplaining, and the period jokes and stuff. And he's trying to have this moment of like reconciliation with them, or at least acknowledging his failures. And I kept waiting for him to do kind of like one heroic thing to help, or one moment of, and instead it just became like the 90s comedy of the helpless dad who everyone's like, oh, well, we still love him anyway. To me, that really took me out of the movie, because it just felt like either he's incompetent because he's kind of awful and let him stay a villain, or give him some ability to be like, look, I know how awful I screwed up. I'm going to try and help and be at least somewhat competent about it.
Yeah.
The way they did it just felt like a 90s family romp shoved into this like very deep, complex movie.
Yeah. So with the parents, I mean, if we can even call them that, what I keep going back to in my head is, they were forced into this mission, and they were all only together for 3 years. So the ties that they have to them, I mean, I just can't imagine for the parent, like for the kids, 100% I understand. Those 3 years were really important. They were young. But as an adult, like imagine you're an agent and you work there and then you get sent on this thing. It's only 3 years of your, 45-year, term being like a mad scientist or whatever. Like, I feel like that's not the most important thing you've ever done in your life, or I don't know. I just kind of, I don't know. I see it a little bit differently from the mom's side. Like, she still worked for them. That was her job. She's, doing the horrible pig stuff. But it wasn't until the end that, like, when Natasha said all that stuff to her, like, you actually really changed my life, did she, you know, say, like, oh, they're going to be here in 5 minutes. I'm really sorry.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed all the interactions between all four of those characters. But it didn't all add up, like, to me in terms of making sense, you know?
Right.
And yeah, like, Alexei's character, I feel like could have been one of the more interesting characters because he actually had agency throughout. So showing what the motivations were would have been kind of powerful, I think. Melina? Is that the mom's name? Like,
yeah.
I feel like it wasn't even said that much, but, like, her, I mean, I guess she was from childhood, right? Was you know, raised in this. So I can understand her having, you know, conflicts within, and, like, she didn't get out the way Natasha did, and then now she's mind controlled to some extent. But she is the one who said, I don't want to go in the beginning. You know?
Yeah.
So clearly that experience, I mean, you can be like, well, it was only 3 years, and I get that, you know? But at the same time, it was the only 3 years that those two were parents.
Right.
And they were parents for that time. Like, they were foster parents, I guess, basically, right? But, like...
Yeah. I feel like more in the moment, I mean, like, when they were taken out of it and, like, the girls taken away from them, like, it was probably hard at first, but then to just keep going on and doing your work, I feel like it wouldn't be too hard, like, difficult for them to fall back into that. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying, like, I can see how an experience like that might be, like, deeply moving and then stay with you even when you've, like, moved on in terms of what you're doing in your life. It might still have some meaning for you that could kind of, you know, pull you back from whatever.
And I guess they're trying to, like, say that that's what brought them around at the end was, you know, love, family, relationships. So they did kind of get there, but not very seamlessly.
Exactly. And, like, I feel like the fight scene at the end was, like, very illogical with everything falling from space and, like, nobody had any superpowers, but we're fine.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
But let's not forget, you don't need logic when you've got family.
There we go. There we go. I really love how quickly you were able to get that, and also how furious it makes Ashley. So,
yes. Not fast, just furious.
Exactly. Yeah, and I hear all that, and I think it's why I keep going back to the idea that, like, if they, I think Ashley, you're right. You can definitely see the reasons why Marina made her turn, and I think you can see the reasons why Alexis made his turn. I just felt like by trying
both wrong.
Both
wrong. I wasn't going to say anything. I'm like, at least go 2 for 2, right? That's good. That's good.
Melina and Alexei. You're like Marina and Alex or
Alexa. Okay, fine. Names, whatever.
I'm sorry. It was really funny. I couldn't hold it in.
The mom and the dad. Look. You know, Sebastian Stan's gonna make a great movie for me one day. I know it's gonna happen. But anyway, I just felt like if you'd given either one of them, like, an actual arc, you know, it would have made a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And this is more like not even an ethical thing, just about the movie itself, but, like, probably the point I think both of you have made sometimes about that whole last scene with the falling stuff, you know, the spaceship or the airship falling, and, like, every time it would blow up, but then it still is falling, and people can be on a different level of it and be fine.
Right, it's ridiculous.
To me, and this kind of gets into the prequelitis ideas of it, which I do think there's some ethical questions there, but also just bad movie making. If the only character in this movie who we 100% know is still alive at the end of the movie, having a lot of the movie center on whether or not Natasha is going to survive in a difficult situation, it's felt like such a waste of it. You know, Ashley, I was kind of channeling you here. Like, I thought one of the 3 of the members of the family was definitely going to die. And frankly, I thought it being one of the parents would probably make the most sense, you know, particularly in kind of like if they made a sacrifice.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I think Elena clearly was going to live, but, like, even if you just showed it, like, tried to generate tension by having the 3 of them, like, Natasha's trying to save them, but we're not sure if they're going to live or not, that would have generated tension.
Yeah.
But I knew for a fact that Natasha doesn't die in this movie because I've seen her in the movie that comes after it. So, it just felt like that was, again, such a...
It did look like they kept trying to make us think that Yelena was going to die. And I was just like, I know that this isn't happening, so you guys could just stop.
Yeah. I mean, she was the one who was kind of put in the most obvious danger, right? Where it looked like she was sacrificing herself or whatever.
Yeah, get her brain cut out. Yeah. Like, I was like, uh-oh, are they going to do this? And then when they blew her off the thing at the end, which was a pretty scene. I really enjoyed the action, but I was just not worried about them at all.
Right. Yeah. Like, I don't mind that kind of stuff that much, but I do understand it to be an issue in terms of, like, drama and, sort of suspense. It didn't feel like there was a whole lot of that to me. I have one more note on the family before getting into the kind of prequelitis thing or whatever. Mm-hmm. Why do they all have Russian accents?
Yeah. Like, and why aren't they all speaking Russian if they're all Russian?
Exactly. Like, the fact that they were sometimes speaking Russian was cool. Like, I don't know how good their Russian is, but, like, I appreciate that detail. But, like, when they're speaking English to each other, they all lived in Ohio for 3 years and passed as American for 3 years. Like, why would they then... I felt like they wanted to show... I don't know. Like, don't forget, these people are Russian. Like, it felt weird to me that they were speaking English in a Russian accent instead of either Russian or English with their, spy accents, basically.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think, we are supposed to believe that, like, the two kids were then raised in Russia, and so probably had a lot of their linguistics.
To be spies.
Yeah. Yeah, so actually to be spies, to speak with pretty much whatever hell accent they want.
Probably speak good British,
And similarly, we knew that Alexei, Alexei, yes. Right. That he, was Russian. He grew up Russian, but he just had then faked an American accent. But yeah, why wouldn't he keep doing it? Who the hell knows? I will say that I felt... like, at least they stuck to it, and they had all the characters speak with Russian accents, and it's just the dumb movie thing. Yeah. Like, we talked on a different episode of this podcast about how in Warrior it makes a lot more sense that, like, if you're showing characters speaking in English, because the understanding should be they're not speaking English, but, like, you don't want to have subtitles for the whole movie, which fine is a choice, even though it's not my favorite. Yeah. I get speaking in the accents to kind of remind us of that. But yeah, it wasn't that.
Yeah, but in Warrior they don't do that, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. That's our point.
I did appreciate the end, like when the other widows were there, and even like the African American ones, the other one, they were all speaking with the Russian accents because that's all they knew.
Yeah, like that part. I thought it's like if you're going to commit to that, then at least they committed to that all the way. Yeah. Although Ray Winstone as Dreykov, like he was doing a Sean Connery version of a Russian accent, so at least that was that was. The Russian accent by way of Scotland or England.
Right. So it felt very, very Bond to me.
Yes.
That whole room felt like a Bond villain room. I mean, they nailed that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Paul, you brought up the prequelitis stuff before. What for you didn't work there about like the way they were trying to tell this story, given that we know that this is all prequel?
Well, so just first, like I want to like just ask the question: why is every female-fronted superhero solo film a prequel? So far.
Yeah.
Like Wonder Woman, World War I, Wonder Woman 84, Captain Marvel in the 90s. This was more recent, but it's still a prequel. I kind of feel like maybe they're trying to be like, see, we've had, powerful women in our universes for the whole time. We just didn't make those movies at the time because, like, the studios didn't want us to. I don't know. Make one that's in the current timeline. I mean, I guess WandaVision is a series, that is. But like it's...
Captain Marvel 2 is going to be current,
right? So that'll be nice,
I guess this would be it for the prequels, right?
I think. I mean, they were talking about making more prequels, but like, I'm not a big fan of prequels in general. I think you bring up the good point of like you can't put your main character in mortal danger if they survive, right?
Right.
So in terms of like what the stakes are, it's difficult. Actually, this movie, it bothered me that it was a prequel because like every other female-fronted superhero solo film, that's hard to say, has been a prequel. But like, I actually like the idea of making movies in certain of these time spans. Like, I think Black Panther 2, an interesting choice would be like make it during the blip. Like, T'Challa wasn't there anyway. So, like, you can tell that story and kind of sidestep it for another few years and then figure out what you're going to do. But, yeah, I mean, prequels, obviously, we did a whole episode on prequels, right? one prequel that I'm watching The Bad Batch right now and really enjoying it. And I actually rewatched the end of the Clone Wars, and there's a very similar scene where Ahsoka's falling out of the sky from a ship that is falling out of the sky and like running on debris and whatever. And it feels like a stretch there, but like she's a Jedi, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And yes, the plot kind of gives Jedi whatever powers it wants to. But like here, that scene felt so out of place here for me because it was like, these aren't the heroes who can fly. So, you know.
Right. Well, although I would say that the Ahsoka scene is very different because, in some ways, because of a different part of prequelitis. Because Ahsoka is this totally interesting new character who's been introduced, who doesn't appear in any of the stuff that was made before but comes later, her dying in that scene would have actually made perfect sense.
Right, exactly.
So she didn't.
So I'd
she didn't have the. Yeah, yes, I get what you're saying. Yeah, without the plot armor, it's a much better way to tell that story.
Exactly. There's suspense, and then there's also believability when she survives because like she has the Force, and like here it was just a little like, well, we know she's going to survive. I don't know how because she's falling out of the sky, but like she's going to, and like ostensibly it's because she's clever and hyper competent and stuff, but it just felt like a little too much of a stretch. I'd rather have foregone that whole space thing and like instead like show me in the beginning how she gets away from Ross, because you could have had something that was really smart, really badass, and would have kind of established her character up front that way. And just, I think it would have required a little bit more clever writing and a little bit less like, let's go for the biggest spectacle.
Yeah.
I think it's fair.
And then have your huge spectacles in Captain Marvel because like she has all the powers, you know?
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense.
I don't know.
I'll just throw one thing into the prequel thing. It's not a hero movie, so I think you're right, it doesn't quite count. It's an anti-hero movie, but Birds of Prey is the only one that I can think of that's like, you know, woman-led, and it is told in the present day of either like Marvel or DC movie.
Right, but it's not a solo film, and that's why I said solo film, which also makes superhero solo film harder to say. But yes, that takes place in whatever the present day of the DC universe is. Like, none of those movies seem to actually have any consequence on one another. But yeah, that's not a prequel, and I appreciate that, you know. Yeah. I would have rather they actually did make a solo film for Harley Quinn and call it a solo film, but whatever, that's a separate thing.
Yeah, that's a different debate. We'll have a different time. Yeah, I think I get that, and you know, I feel like with all prequels, it always raises the question of, okay, now that you've put this new piece on the board, why wasn't this piece used at all during these next years? You know,
right.
And it does seem at least that we're going to get more about what Yelena's doing, since we now know that she's been like kind of working with Val for the last couple of years. Although I have some thoughts about how that was raised, but I like in some ways. I think I loved this. I have so many thoughts about that scene between Natasha and Dreykov at the end, because so much of it was so good, and then just a few things that were bad were like, no, you're stepping on this great moment. Because honestly, one of the things I'd really loved about this movie up until now was that the stakes were very low.
Oh, yeah.
You know, in terms of like, you know, like, yes, like 50 or 100 women are having their lives completely destroyed by this man. And maybe their victims are like 500 people. Like, that's very, very serious. But compared to like the villain's going to blow up a city of 8 million, you know, a total of 600 people at risk is a much smaller thing.
Well, weren't they saying that one of every 20 girls, he kills all of them and only saves one?
Right. Yeah, okay.
That's a lot of girls.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we could get into the thousands maybe, but it's still a very small kind of a story, which I loved, especially because for most of the movie, and this also goes to the kind of collateral stuff that I wish they'd explored more, for most of the movie, Natasha doesn't have this high-minded idea of, I have to save the world because he's going to destroy things. He screwed up her life and she wants revenge, and she wants to kill him. And, like, I think she wants to stop what he's doing and stop the harm he's doing. But it just felt like such a nice, like, yeah, in this one little part of the world, this one person is doing horrible things to this small group of people, and Natasha wants to stop him, and Yelena joins her. And so at the end, when he gave this, like, 30-second, you know, I control empires and economics and wars and peace, which makes no sense whatsoever, especially because it's never been discussed in the world before.
Right.
That was just one of those things where, like, if this is a complete standalone movie, sure. For this to fit into a larger MCU, it just... I was just like, you were doing so well. You had a small little villain doing a small little thing. Just stick with that. You don't have to have like this grand plan.
And for everyone to not know that he was still alive. And I mean, I feel like right now what we're talking about, I also don't love that it was a villain that was already supposed to be dead yet again. Villains don't die. No one ever dies. And now he's back again. And it was just like she has to do it all over again. I'm like, cool.
Especially because it kind of it means that like this horrible thing Natasha, first of all, like, I'm glad Dreykov's daughter isn't dead, but it also sort of means that like Natasha's been carrying all this guilt for no reason, which I feel like kind of undercuts her character.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also if she felt like at least the thing I did was it did this good thing. Yeah, if he's still alive, it kind of like takes that away from her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like making Dreykov out to be this big master villain at the end just felt totally irrelevant because like we already know that he doesn't do anything of consequence going forward because we've seen the future. And like they may have well have kept the stakes relatively small and believable. I mean, I think, you know, Ashley, you make a great point. I think it was like 1 in 30 or something like survives the training, right? So like this is a large number of girls that he has kidnapped and, you know, murdered or turned into assassins, right? He's taken their lives away. And that's a big deal. Like you don't have to make it a bigger deal, right?
Yeah.
Like
that's enough.
I wasn't all trying to say to minimize that was more my point. Is like
he's not saying that.
Yeah, totally. No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying like, look, like that
would have been enough.
Yeah, that's enough. Like that's relatively small. It doesn't have to be the control of the globe and whatever. It's like no, it's like killing a bunch of girls is horrible, and stopping someone from doing that and going forward is good. Like that's it. Like that's enough. You know, you don't have to like make him this big master villain. I mean, maybe a way of headcanoning it is like maybe he's deluding himself, you know, and he's not really doing that. But like that's headcanon. That's not, you know, text. I also think
that would have been such a beautiful thing as well if she'd been able to expose that and be like,
you're nothing.
Yeah. And then I also do feel like you know, that like his daughter being Taskmaster felt very predictable. It does undercut, you know, Nat's guilt to some extent. Although, you know, I mean, then again, we don't know what her life would have been like otherwise. It doesn't seem great now, although she has superpowers. Right. But like, again, like
she's RoboCop under there, I think.
Exactly.
It's just a head, right?
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it felt like a little bit of like Wonder Woman parallels, like the first one, where, you know, for all the things that like it's great to have these like female-fronted, female-led solo films, like I feel like Wonder Woman fell into the trope of like, okay, you have the gorgeous woman hero, you have the like heavyset you know, friend who's like comic relief, and then you have the like disfigured woman as like the evil woman. And it's like, you know, here it's like you have the one woman who's like disfigured from getting blown up by Natasha, like now she's like the villain, and she gets, you know, set free, and she didn't want to be the villain, but like it feels like not the best, you know, like there's still some kind of, I don't know, sort of like internalized misogyny there.
I think it's
that
fair.
Hasn't been escaped from yet.
Yeah, well, especially because to me, I was definitely hoping that was going to be at least the one person who couldn't be red misted. You know, that there had to be, you know, because I mean it was her father,
right?
You know, and that maybe that she was the one person who really bought into all
maybe
of
she
this.
had agency.
Yeah, like I actually thought there was going to be like, I don't know much about the biology of pheromones, but like, you know, I assume there's some level of genetics to it. I was kind of wondering if there'd be like a little bit of that from her. But yeah, it could play with that a lot. So
that could have been the scene you wanted, Fox, if she talked her that didn't work on her and she talked the daughter down.
Yeah, that could have been such a good, just to have some level of that kind of agency. When
she's about to kill another family member. There it is. We just fixed the end of this movie.
There you go. All right,
Monday morning movie doctors, I think is what. It's Monday morning when we're recording this. Where I am, anyway.
Yes.
Everyone else is in the afternoon.
Exactly. So let's just talk about the post-credit scene as kind of a wrap-up. What'd y'all think?
I think that Yelena needs to call Alicia Silverstone and give her her outfit back from Clueless. What the hell was that? Sorry, broadcast.
I had I thought we're no longer in the 90s anymore moment when I saw that.
It's like yellow plaid on top of yellow plaid. Oh.
You know what?
I had...
I mean, the fact that she grew up in the 90s in the U.S. and then now here she's coming back to the U.S., maybe she feels like that's just how Americans dress. I don't know.
She looked like she was dressed for London. I'm sorry.
90s nostalgia is becoming a thing again.
Yeah.
So for me, I had like three distinctly different... I kind of look at that end scene as two distinctly different scenes that I had wildly different reactions to.
Mm-hmm.
The first part felt like one more, we're going to fix what other directors did to like screw up Natasha's character earlier, which is that, to me, one of the glaring weaknesses of Endgame is that Tony gets this like beautiful moving funeral scene and Natasha doesn't.
Yeah.
And like when we just that one shot of Natasha's grave and it's calling her like, Avenger, I teared up because I was like, that I would like more, but like that alone was such a powerful moment for me of like, yeah, this is what she should have gotten in Endgame.
Yep. And it's like, who put that there? We have no information about how and why that stone got there, and that bothers me a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry, like I would love to see like some flowers that were left there by, Steve or someone like, or it could have been Steve.
It could have been.
Someone like.
It could have been.
Yeah. Timelines, whatever.
They had a little bit of time.
Yeah, but like some acknowledge. Yeah, that's right, because the funeral and stuff like that. But some acknowledgement from someone there. But I still thought it was so powerful. Mm-hmm. But then I felt like a while ago when Paul and I talked about Ultron many years ago at this point now, I said, I think many of others have said that like one of my complaints was there were scenes that felt like they didn't make any sense except that they set up things coming later. And like, to me, that's how I felt about Yelena and Val. Because on the one hand, Val and Yelena, it kind of highlighted again that I felt like I had no understanding of where Yelena wound up morally at the end of this movie. Like, is she still basically a widow, just not under Dreykov's control? Is she more on a hero turn? I don't know. And I felt like I needed to know that in order to understand why she was with Val. But I was like, okay, well, that could be an interesting connection. I'd love to see where that goes. Until they said, like, we want you to kill Hawkeye.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Maybe there's some comics. That felt to me like all that had happened was some writer was like, okay, well, we want her in the Hawkeye show. Why would she be in the Hawkeye show? Maybe she's trying to kill Hawkeye. Why would she be trying to kill Hawkeye? Well, let's have it be as part of the Black Widow movie. It made no sense whatsoever to anything. And just that, if Yelena's character is supposed to be like the new Black Widow, it felt like they were just like, okay, we fixed all the ways we did Natasha dirty. Now let's do Yelena dirty. I just hated that. It was like 2 minutes, but
as a spy, like, sure, say she takes that mark and she's like, all right, I'm going to do this. The tiniest amount of digging will show like the relationship that he had with Nat. Like, it wasn't some secret that they were friends. And I could see them, I was saying this in the MCU cast, I could see them having her actually kill him in the Hawkeye show. And that's how the new Hawkeye is going to rise up, because then it's going to be like, he's going to be like, forgive her, she, to Kate Bishop, like, you have to forgive her. She thought I killed blah, blah, blah. And then it'll be like them trying to work that out. That's just my theory with that. I'd actually really like that, to be honest, get rid of him. But other than that, like, I don't see what the point is unless they're all supposed to work together pretty quickly.
Yeah.
In Hawkeye. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think if by some writer had that idea, you mean Kevin Feige, then yeah. Like that's the sort of thing that comes down from on high, right? It's not like someone's like, oh, what if we just put this in randomly? Like, I think a lot of the post-credit scenes are not like the screenwriters of the movie coming up with the idea, right?
Right. That's true. Very true. Yeah.
I've seen it described as one of the best end credit scene, and for me, it felt like one of the worst. I
don't agree that it's the best.
I do really appreciate the, like, oh, she has a gravestone, even though, like, I think the idea of gravestones are generally silly, and, like, there's obviously not a body there, right? But, like, the idea that her, that she is mourned and on screen, for more than just, like, the 6 Avenger dudes, like, sitting around like, oh, man, that's a bummer. And like, oh,
yeah, hard, like, one tear. Yeah. One tear from Steve in that. I was super annoyed.
There's parts in Endgame with that I do kind of like. Like, I like how Thor's like, but just do it. Like, what do you mean that's not how it works? But, like...
Oh, yeah, he reacts.
Yeah, but, like, it definitely, the fact that then Tony gets this big send-off, but, like, she doesn't. And, I think this is nice that there was that part of that scene there, right? And that it says Avenger too, you know, it's like...
Well, and you know what's weird now that you bring up that scene? So this movie happens. She goes and meets up with Steve. She didn't tell Steve anything about where she was or who she was with, or that she was so happy that she realized she has two families in the 2 years that they were going by, for at the end, for him to be like, does she have any family? And all Steve says is us.
Yeah.
Right.
Really? She didn't talk about it?
Yeah, that does feel a little like that might be useful information when you're like on the run, that there's like a bunch of Black Widows out there and like you're related to some of them, sort of, like, you know, like...
Oh, good. Yeah. How? What about if like some of the Black Widows had helped her and Steve break everybody out of the prison, the raft?
Yeah. So many different, and I mean, she did get a. You know, he's like, "Where'd you get that Quinjet?" Oh, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Oh, I found it.
Yeah.
And then in the 5 years between, you know, and Infinity War and Endgame, like, did you not try to see if your sister got dusted? Did you even try to find your family to be like, oh my God, half the people are gone. Are you still there? Did all of them get dusted?
I have to think they did get dusted. Otherwise, like, that's just like the convenient way for them to be like, this is why they weren't part of the plot, basically.
Right.
You know?
And so then in that time, how did Yelena start working for Val? It's just like the timelines here are weird.
Yeah. I have to say, Yelena working for Val, I was like, wait, so she's going to be working with John Walker? Oh, hell no.
Yeah. Dark Avengers, man. They're putting together the Dark Avengers. 100%.
I want her to kill John Walker then. That's the only way.
That'd be fantastic.
I would love it if they like put John Walker on all of the publicity and like make a big deal about him.
Just like,
and then like
in the first scene.
5 minutes into the movie, he says something like racist or sexist, and just Yelena just kills him, and Val's like, yeah, that wasn't gonna work out, and just like move on, you know. All right, I think now that we are deep into the tangential like rewriting of movies, we can probably wrap this thing up. Any other last comments from either of you two on Black Widow and kind of the ethical questions it raises?
Everything aside that I just said, I did really enjoy the movie. I really did like it.
Yeah, I guess I would say that I didn't enjoy it that much, but I very much appreciate that it exists and that there are people who enjoy it a lot. And like, there were things that bothered me about it, but there were other things like it being more Bond than Bourne that's just preference. That's just like, I don't like Bond anymore. Like, it took me a while to realize that. I want things to be more clever and cunning, and I wish I do feel like they didn't do her character as much justice as they could have, but they did her character more justice than if she'd never gotten a solo film. So I'm glad she did finally get it.
Right.
I wish it had happened 5 years ago, and I wish the movie was a little different, but like I'm very glad that it exists at least, and hopefully you know, we'll have more equitable distribution of solo titles going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd say I agree with all of that. And I really like the points both of you have made. And just kind of my wrap-up thoughts are, you know, I said a while ago that I wasn't sure if I was going to go see this movie because I do have a lot of issues with Scarlett Johansson and, like, her opinions on racial stuff and actors and things like that. And, you know, there's so much written about that issue. I don't want to go back into it here. But to me, a big part of why I decided to go ahead and watch the movie was because I do feel like movies like this need to succeed, you know, because there is still that idiotic idea in Hollywood that you can't have female-led movies. And I'm really glad for that. And I'm glad that, you know, I don't think there never has to be a romance. And I'm glad that, you know, Wonder Woman and Steve, like, made a lot of sense for that movie, although Wonder Woman 84, not so much. But that's a different story entirely.
Not so much.
I'm glad here that, like, I mean, you know, as you said, like, there was never the scene where Natasha gets woken up in bed and so we just happen to see her in her underwear and a tank top. Like, there was none of that. You know, there was, like, compared to all the, like, the beefcake scenes in almost every, like, this was perhaps one of the most, like, chaste MCU movies we've had in a long time, which was fitting. It was perfectly acceptable, which was fitting and made a lot of sense for the story they were telling. So I'm glad I saw it. I'm glad I gave money to it because I want it to make a lot of money. And I think I'm kind of halfway between the two of you. Like, I don't think I enjoy... I think next time I just want to watch a fun thing for a couple of hours without thinking about it too much. This will be a perfectly good movie for that. I think it wasn't the movie that I wanted it to be and that I think it could have been. And part of that, I think, also is just that I kind of feel like the MCU is a little bit like they've raised the bar on themselves really high. Like, with movies like Black Panther and Civil War and Winter Soldier and I know not everyone agrees, but like Infinity War and Endgame, like they've shown you can do so much more in the superhero genre that a movie that is just superheroes doing cool things and blowing things up and quipping at each other, and every now and then confronting something a little bit of a deep issue, but not really going too far into it. Like, I think you can do so much more. And it's funny, I was on another podcast about this that I think will have gone live by this time. I'm not sure, but it's on the Next Reel, I believe is the podcast it's on, so you can check that out. We also had a great discussion about this movie there. And a point that I made, which I'll make here again, is honestly, I feel like this could have been a great Disney Plus show. Because imagine if we had like a full episode in 95 and a full episode, or even just like that was flashback throughout, and a full episode in like the Red Room, you know, and like just really go deep on all these characters. Like,
I'm so spoiled by it. I needed this to be a 6 hour thing.
Yeah, like if you're gonna give us new characters, I'm just not. 15 minutes of characterization is just not enough for me anymore. And maybe I'm spoiled, but yeah, like we're in a new age. Bring us the TV.
Yeah, down with theaters.
I agree.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I'm not quite there yet.
With theaters,
I'm
up
not
with
quite
streaming.
there yet, but I'm close. But then also I live in the Midwest, so I'm not like super close to people to begin with.
Yeah.
Anyway, so great discussion. I know both of you are doing a lot of great content in other places. Ashley, you're kind of like the queen of the MCU right now in the Stranded Pandoverse. What's going on with you?
It feels like.
I know you're doing that and a couple of other pursuits these days. Where can people find you?
I guess Wednesdays we do trivia on Twitch at 7 Central. 7 Central. We're doing Loki, the finales this week, so it's going to be a big episode. You can join us live on Twitch for that at 6 Central. And then this Thursday, I have the Legends and Libations with Jeff Randall from the MCU cast, where we kind of just get drunk and talk about this week Norse mythology again. We're kind of doing a little series. And that's pretty much it, you know, just sitting over there.
Yeah, and that's on Stranded Panda TV is the Twitch channel. Definitely check that out. And also check out, if you're not already subscribing, the MCU podcast. I think it's just called MCU Cast.
MCU Cast, yeah.
You can find it on strandedpanda.com, where Ashley, Jeff, and Matt just go really deep on this stuff. And every episode of Loki is covered. Black Widow, anything Marvel you're looking for, you're going to find there. And Ashley's a very, very big contributor, which I think has just made it so much better. Paul, what about yourself?
I just want to give a shout out to Legends and Libations, because I just caught the tail end the first week, but then I rewatched the VOD, and it was very entertaining. So I'm looking forward to this Thursday.
I feel like I have big shoes to fill this Thursday. It's my turn to tell a story. I'm scared.
Nice. I think you're gonna be all. Yeah, I have not yet gotten to check it out, but I keep hearing awesome things, and we're looking forward to doing so.
Yeah, do. I'm on Twitch most days, almost every day. Streaming poker, sometimes some other stuff on Zed Madman on Twitch and on Twitter. You know, that's about it right now.
You have the Star Wars cast.
Oh yeah, I also appear on this and the Star Wars Universe podcast, which we're doing Bad Batch, and I think most weeks I'm on, maybe like half the time, something like that. Yeah. I'm really enjoying that series a lot. I don't know, it's doing very little that annoys me. And
yeah,
and that's rare.
That is so rare.
I know. There's just so many things that like annoy me. I don't know. I should stop watching fiction and just write my own. But like it's nice watching something that's just like, you know, I might have enjoyed as many things in Black Widow as I do in Bad Batch. But Bad Batch just doesn't have things that make me go like,
yeah,
you know. So
it's a little funny because we've talked about before about how like you hated Last Jedi and then had this kind of Schadenfreude moment when I then hated Rise of Skywalker. And there was a moment of time when you were really down on the MCU and I wasn't. Yeah. And now, frankly, like I didn't hate Black Widow, but I disliked a lot of it. And frankly, I absolutely despise Loki right now. I hate everything about that show. So I'm kind of going closer to being the MCU misanthrope, like kind of following along. That funny. Like Paul hates something, that means a month or a year later I'm going to wind up hating it too. But that's entirely other story. But anyway,
Paul, do you hate Loki?
You know what? I'll address that. I've hated parts of Loki for sure. I'm kind of in Rise of Skywalker territory with Loki now, where I'm just like, all right, whatever. Like, you've done enough stuff that, like, in terms of, like, canon, I don't care at all. Like, but there are moments that I really enjoy, and I kind of just watch it, and I enjoy the moments I enjoy, and I just don't really care about what happens.
Yeah, and that might be fair. It's like, you already had your, like, I'm down with Marvel moment. Yeah. So, like, you got to go, I'm down with Star Wars, so Rise of Skywalker's fine. I'm down with Marvel, so now Loki's fine. And I'm in that, like, no, this is the thing that makes me hate it.
Right. Yeah. There were things in some episodes, but just now I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, I may likely skip the 6th episode. I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. But anyway, I will not be talking about Loki though in any of my podcasts. I think we've talked about it a little bit. Actually, that's a lie. Paul and I are probably going to do a wrap-up episode of the whole show, so I guess I have to watch the 6th episode at some point. But putting all that aside...
I feel like I need to be there to defend it.
I feel like... I was like, I'm going to watch the 6th episode, like, the minute it comes out, I'm sure. But, like, I'll probably... I don't know. I was thinking maybe not of being on that episode. I was thinking of not being on the Black Widow episode because honestly, like, I don't love being negative about things, you know? Like, I think what I think, I feel what I feel, and, like, if someone asks me, I'm going to say it. But, like, you know, I feel like I did have enough positive things to say about this movie as well, and some of the things that I complain about are, like, reasons I wanted it to be better because I think it is a very important movie.
I hear that. Let me wrap up the episode, and then we can keep ranting about Loki for the Patreon or something. You talked about how you can find all of them on different places. You can find me as The Ethical Panda on Facebook or on Twitter, or theethicalpanda.com, or theethicalpanda@gmail.com for email. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear feedback. We've done some feedback episodes. We're going to do those again, or just kind of take comments and questions about things. What did you think of Black Widow? Did you love some of the things we talked about not liking, or do you have different views on these questions? Definitely get into us. Please find us in all those places. So, Paul, we'll just keep enjoying this thing of where, like, you start hating something, and then a month later or a year later, I start hating the thing, and I'm like, Paul, you're with me, right? And you're like, I don't care anymore.
Care anymore. Billionaire's going into space. I can't really get worked up. Like, not saying it's good, but...
All right, so on that happy note, I am going to call an end to this. Thank you all so much for listening. Thanks for sticking around for this nonsense the last 15 minutes. And have a good day.
I'm calling an end to this.
Bye.